Please bring in Brian Wiebe. Brian, there's a lot of people in Sask just sitting, waiting for your words on Wexit. You know what I'm talking about. The 5 teams leaving Alberta Junior Hockey League to go to BC. Dude, what's your take more than anything? And by the way, he's with BC Hockey Network. Blah, blah, blah. We all know that. What do you have to say about it?
Well, I mean, I was shocked when I started to see the rumors on Friday night. And then I think all of that smoke caused the BCHL to attempt to put out the fire in the fact that they announced it on Saturday. And I mean, my initial thought is, I mean, you talked about it a few years ago. It's been rumored for, gosh, I'll be honest, Rod, like 20 years I've been involved in covering the league or in the league itself. I've been involved in, the rumors have always been there, like that there was some sort of super league coming. And although it's not quite that at this point, but grabbing those 5 teams from the Alberta Junior Hockey League, I think what's happened is really my first thoughts were those clubs recognize that the BCHL leaving Hockey Canada and leaving the Canadian Junior Hockey League hasn't been a huge detriment.
I know. And I'm glad that I called a mentor of mine this morning in Junior A to talk about this, because there were a lot of threats when BC Hockey League talked about leaving, and they didn't care. They did it anyways. And I won't say from whom or where, but they did it anyways. Like you just said, they survived, maybe thrived, maybe went to a new level. Yeah. And are those 5 teams saying in Alberta saying, we want part of this? Like, why would they do this now?
I think that's what it is. I think it's like, we know that what Hockey Canada has a number of restrictions in place for junior A hockey, and the BCHL wasn't pleased with a lot of those restrictions, and as a result decided to make the move to leave Hockey Canada. And I think that, and I'll be honest, I think a lot of leagues across the country in junior A and B for that matter, we're looking at the success or lack of success, depending on how it went for the BCHL this season, and are potentially thinking to themselves, this might not be all that bad. And so now these 5 teams leaving the Alberta Junior Hockey League and joining the BCHL as expansion clubs don't have those restrictions either. And I think the other piece of the pie here is that BCHL teams at this point, like, there's no January 10th deadline in the BCHL. It's a later deadline. And so as a result, like, they could sign any player from any Alberta Junior Hockey League team right now with zero compensation going back the other way. As an independent league, the BCHL can do that. Just like we've seen it over the years, players leave junior A teams and leagues in Canada and go down to the United States Hockey League or the North American Hockey League in the US. And so I think that's the other thing that these AJHL teams are doing, is they're now protecting themselves, because if those BCHL teams want any of the players that are on their roster, now that they're part of the league, they have to trade for them.
I'm trying to relate this. God bless the American viewers and fans. They're trying to get their head around this. It's complicated, Brian. I believe it is. And it's not a lot different than football schools changing conferences for their own reasons. But I guess one thing Darren talked about last hour, and he's very close to the junior A scene too, is that did the BC Hockey League feel they were falling behind the Western Hockey League and Major Junior in terms of recruiting players? I mean, because this is the thing. I know a lot of coaches that have worked in BC and are now they're across the country, but still in Junior A, and they say money is the reason they're doing it. And I'm still trying to get my head around that. What is it? All of the above, or what?
Yeah, I think a little bit. I mean, I'm not so sure that it's a recruiting battle with the Western Hockey League, because the BCHL published a really extensive white paper a couple years ago that outlines everything. And I've seen a lot of references on social media this week where people are like, why is this happening? And I'm like, well, read the white paper, because it lays it all out. They didn't necessarily look at major junior hockey in Canada as being this horrible thing and stealing their players and all that kind of stuff. They just wanted Hockey Canada to recognize that there's another track, to acknowledge that there are players that have no interest in playing major junior hockey, no interest in being part of the Canadian development model, because their goal is getting an education and going and playing in the United States. And we've seen the number of college players in the National Hockey League that are alumni of the NCAA Division I, that really lend it some credence to that. And so I think what it was is the BCHL just wanted that sort of recognition, and they were fed up with not getting it. And now they want to be the premier track to college hockey in Canada, much like the United States Hockey League is in the US.
When I reported it 3 years ago, the addendum to this was that the BC Hockey League would be a division of the USHL. And I don't know. It's just what I was told. How the hell would I know? And that never did happen. Will it ever?
Yet.
Do you think?
I'm not sure of that. I mean, it's could we see us? The one thing about the USHL to remember is that it is sanctioned by USA Hockey, and that's the one thing, is that there's a bit of a gray area here, because what international federations are supposed to do is recognize I'm trying to think about the right language here, but essentially USA Hockey is supposed to recognize the fact that the BCHL is a non-sanctioned league and shouldn't permit its players to move to and from or play against or whatever. But what we've seen recently is that there have been BCHL players, international players, that played in the World Junior Championship this year. And technically, again, based on IIHF, acknowledgement of other federations' rules, they shouldn't have, because those players are playing non-sanctioned hockey this season by playing in the BC Hockey League. And so I don't think that we'll see the BCHL be a division of, but I could see there maybe some sort of agreement between the teams that, you get games against, or a tournament or something like that, especially if the BCHL continues to expand east.
I appreciate the explanation, and I feel like now we're getting somewhere for the people that didn't know, and that includes me. You've been on top of this for a long time. But basically, the BC Hockey League, Junior A Hockey League, was upset at Hockey Canada's rules. They broke off on their own, and they actually didn't die. So now Alberta's looking at it going, we'd like a part of this too. And my next point is there are other teams looking at it too. We know that. Okay?
I think league.
Sorry,
I think that's what it is. I was just going to say, I think leagues, I think what we'll see is there will be other leagues in Canada that are at the Junior A level that will break away from Hockey Canada and not be Junior A at all. They'll just be a non-sanctioned junior hockey league.
Yes. And my point on that is I don't expect Hockey Canada to change their rules. In full disclosure, I'm a Hockey Canada guy. I am. I get where their rules came from and why. I do. They're not going to be bullied by Junior A leagues, right? Like this is a standoff is kind of where it's at.
It's absolutely what it is. It's a standoff, like there's no doubt. And I think that these 5 teams leaving the Alberta Junior Hockey League to be expansion teams in the BCHL, because let's make no bones about it, they're expansion clubs in the BCHL, because a Junior A team under Hockey Canada's model can't have lineage in a non-sanctioned league. Sure, they can have the same name and logo and all that kind of stuff. But I think you're absolutely right in the fact that, I do think that this is I think the BCHL leaving and thriving, getting attention from NCAA schools, which isn't Hockey Canada's mandate. I get that. But also the National Hockey League. The Central Scouting rankings come out, and there's still BCHL players, among the top at that level in the draft rankings, and that draws attention as well. So I don't think Hockey Canada will ignore this, but I'm with you. I don't think that it necessarily is going to institute sweeping changes to its regulations. When, let's be honest, we know teams have been working to get around those regulations for years. It's just the BCHL didn't want to try to stick handle, no pun intended, although maybe it is a pun intended, tried to get around that by having, residence changes and stuff like that, which is much more detailed than I'm going to get into and have time with you here today. But that's the thing, is that the BCHL finally just said, you know what, this is enough. We don't want to make families, players go through all this stuff. And I think those 5 teams in Alberta are too. So I'm with you. I don't think Hockey Canada is going to change that. I just think we could end up seeing a higher level of non-sanctioned hockey in Canada.
Well, let me just say this. It was so nice to be able to pick up the phone and call a guy, have him answer it, and know he wasn't going to BS me. And he laid it all out. You get it, right? And the one thing he said was, those 5 teams haven't been kicked out of the AJ yet. He goes, but the day ain't over yet. He goes, they're meeting on it now. He goes, I wouldn't be surprised if they were, but as of yet, they're not. And it was just nice to be able to And that's what you're doing for us. So, Brian, I appreciate that. And tell our audience, if you don't mind, where they can follow all of this with your coverage.
Thanks very much, Rod. BCHLnetwork.com, BCHLnetwork.ca is where you can check out my team of writers that are working on content about this. The latest article up there is one speculating about what the new divisions might look like in the BCHL come the 24-25 season. And on all your social media handles too, at BCHL Network is where to find the content. And me on social media, especially X, formerly known as Twitter, is at Brian_Wiebe.
Will always be Twitter to me. Brian,
thanks Rod. Me
thanks
too.
for the time. Yeah, happy trails.
You got it. Thanks so much, man.
All right, Brian Wiebe joining us from the wet coast, the other coast. A long ways away from where we are right now, I'll tell you that for free.